To an anthropologist, a fictional world is more than just a setting. It is a deliberate expression of culture filled with both intentional design and accidental artifacts. Hi there, I'm Mal. As an archaeologist and anthropologist, I love analyzing the things people have made. In this series, I am applying that lens to the world of Azeroth. We aren't looking at the lore found in novels or elsewhere, we're looking at the game world as it is constructed, perhaps even how it reflects on our real-world societies. As part of that, we are not necessarily doing a lore deep dive. Instead, I want to deconstruct the little things, the choices made by level designers, writers, artists, and others, to see what they reveal about these constructed societies, intentional or not. We will be relying fairly strictly on in-game evidence, from buildings to NPC dialogue and environmental storytelling, rather than using those more curated external materials. The sources often do greatly expand on the lore, but we want to focus on the society we actually see constructed inside the game world. And if you enjoy this anthropological approach to gaming, please consider subscribing. It helps us immensely as we build this series. Today, we're going to once again be looking at the Ghostlands in Quel'Tha Loss as they were following the Burning Crusade. This is the southern section of Quel'Tha Loss, the ghostly counterpart to the glimmering Eversong Woods of the north. This is part 2 of our exploration of this zone. If you've watched part 1, welcome back. If you haven't, I highly recommend going to watch it, linked here and in the description. As a quick recap, we are here to reclaim the Ghostlands for the Sindori. Our overall command and strategy were set down by Demure in Tranquillion. That strategy is to consolidate and secure. We have a number of vulnerable flanks before we can march on the ultimate goal, Deatholme, and its commander, the traitor Darkon Drathyr. So far, we have cleared and secured the village of Suncrown, and then followed on by supporting the Farstriders against the Shadowpine trolls, all but wiping those people out in the process. Now, we are returning to Tranquillion to report on our success and get our next orders against the Scourge. We need to return to Arcanist Vandrel to let him know about Suncrown specifically. The themes that we have seen and explored so far include resilience, the elves here refusing to give in under incredibly brutal circumstances. Pragmatism, using whatever tools they can and have available to solve a problem, though unfortunately this also means potentially relying on unfit commanders. And hostility. We have seen heightened aggression from the Sindori, especially towards their ancient rivals in the forest trolls. They are no longer content to have pushed the trolls back up into the mountains. Now they are pushing for their eradication and resorting to whatever tactics will get the job done. Let's keep these discussions in mind as we move into the rest of the Ghostlands proper and the remainder of our campaign against the Scourge. We also have the Forsaken's contributions to look at and keep an eye out for. We are getting some interesting early hints into them as well. We resume our exploration with the return trip to Tranquillion, carefully picking our way through the haunted and cursed landscape, dodging the starving plagued wildlife or bulldozing through as needed. Once we finally return to the relative safety of the guarded town, we seek out Arcanist Vandrel to report in regarding Suncrown Village and the Nerubian Scourge we wiped out there. He actually apologizes to us for the shoddy intelligence he had regarding a Noxu 10, the Nerubian leader. The elves are still spread too thin and many things are falling through the cracks. We have seen just how exceptionally important this sort of scouting and intelligence is for the elves. There will be casualties if they have inadequate information. He has our next objective ready for us though. We need to head to another village, Golden Mist to the northwest. This one he believes to be held by raised spirits of dead elves, a favored tactic of the Scourge evidently. Such spirits would definitely make reclaiming the village harder for the elves. Those are the fallen spirits of their kin, and are evidently tougher than the Nerubians and certainly the basic fleshy, bony Scourge we often face. Let's take a brief moment here to discuss what we've already learned of the Scourge. So far, they mostly operate as a faceless mass of undead, though we know they also have leaders and more elite forces that can seemingly operate semi-independently. Corruption is their primary mode of conquest and control. Plague and corrupt the land to make it nigh impossible for opposing forces to reclaim or even counter-push. Their numbers are tied to how many bodies they can find or how many souls, so keeping the engine of war moving must be important. When they get bogged down in extended conflicts, particularly if they're not able to recover new sources of bodies, they become more vulnerable. Their endless numbers become slightly more endable. Thus, our current situation is actually somewhat tenable. As long as we can reduce or deny these Scourge new bodies, we have an opportunity to counterattack and cut the head off the skeletal snake. Unfortunately, we did just create a massive pile of new troll bodies, so hopefully they don't find that. Using terror and morale is another seemingly favored tactic of the Scourge. Their ability to raise and twist the dead against their former compatriots is devastating enough normally, but for a long-lived people like the Elves, it must be doubly devastating. Much of their power, though, seems to come from an air of invincibility, of unstoppability. As soon as you break that perception, have the idea that they can be weakened or stopped, you can shatter that great advantage they have. The Scourge almost certainly wants their foes to think of them as unstoppable, relentless, innumerable, but the reality of using the dead as a resource is that you are limited, and they have distinct weaknesses, like eliminating key leaders, that are even more poignant than they already are against mortal forces. Thus, we get the idea that half the battle against the Scourge is keeping up morale, keeping spirits high, and breaking that air of invincibility. And we know that the Elves are doing just that, channeling their rage, their hatred, and their vengeance into retaking the Ghostlands. Demure and High Executor Mavrin have put together a strategy to nullify the Scourge's advantages and capitalize on their weaknesses. Though they each have a different way of going about it, their end goal is the same: defeat the Scourge here by yoinking the head of Darkon and field goaling it back through the gates of Quel'Thalas. So let's get down to business to defeat the Skelehunds. Nearby, the Forsaken supplier Rathus Toomber flags us down. He tells us that he cannot supply the war effort if he cannot safely get his supplies here. Evidently, he was promised an escort that never came, and he had to leave one of his carts behind when they were swarmed by a pack of ghouls. If we can recover those supplies, he can get his shop opened back up and begin resupplying the effort here. This confirms a couple of things for us. One, that resupplying this position is both dangerous and difficult. And two, that the forces here are indeed stretched thin and cannot even escort supply caravans, not exactly the most optional of operations. Rathus also indicates he was making a profit from the war effort, so he is a true merchant, not just here as part of a military order or altruistically in the service of defeating the Scourge. Anyone who has ever done the old selling grain around method in Warband or Bannerlord knows exactly how filthy rich Rathus here must be. Back up the hill into Tranquillion proper, we are also approached by Magister Durenis. He lets us know they have gotten one of the arcane sanctums down here restored and operational, the Sanctum of the Sun. However, the nearby Sanctum of the Moon is still inoperable. Not much of this sanctum remains, but what is there has given rise to the weird arcane creatures we've seen before. Durenis does not want any resources they have to go to waste, and would like us to recover the crystallized essences of those weird arcane creatures via our favorite method: yoinkage via rapid, unplanned, invasive surgery. There's a couple of notes here to keep in mind from Durenis. He mentioned that a group of Magisters came down from Silvermoon to restore the Sanctum of the Sun, so clearly they are involved in the war effort here. In what capacity and under whose orders is still a bit unclear. It could give us a great deal of insight into the command structure if we can figure that out though. We are also getting one of our first hints as to the overall strategy in war or conflict that the Elves have favored in the past: acquiring, studying, and utilizing weird stuff to find a fun, exciting, and novel solution to aggression. We will get a lot more information about this soon. I am also quite interested in hearing more about this detachment of Magisters themselves. We've not seen them engage in combat directly, rather relying upon minions to carry out most tasks. The reclaiming of the Ghostlands and the Sanctums down here is seemingly important enough to send an entire cadre of these elites to be involved, not just relying upon the more martial factions and operatives to take care of it. As we check in with Dame Auriferous, she has another new threat for us to investigate. a potential problem to be dealt with. Night Elves have been sighted setting up a base on an island off the coast, and a forward detachment has set up on an old leyline nexus called Andoroth. The commander needs us to take out these conceited Kaldori, as she calls them, and figure out what the hell they're up to. If they are fiddling with the ley lines, that could have catastrophic implications for the magic of Silvermoon and the Sindori. Presumably, she has had some reports back and knows of the Darnassian intruders lurking around the sanctums back north in Eversong. Once we finish up with Auriferous, Deathstalker Maltendis, the advisor to the High Executor, calls us over to discuss another problem. The Underlight mines, southwest of Tranquillion, have been overrun by Blackpaw gnolls of all things. Those mines are evidently extremely important to the ongoing conflict, so we need to wipe out the Blackpaw and reclaim them. He doesn't have any more intelligence for us on why the Blackpaw are here, why or how they took the mines, or any indication on how the Forsaken or Elves were holding the mines in the first place. Clearly, the Forsaken care less about the why and more about the go kill it. Those mines are far outside the defensive cordon of Tranquillion, and across the Scar itself as well, so it must have been both costly and difficult to control them. They also give us some hints of how the forces here were expected to operate. Since this was all Elven territory originally, the locations of important resources are known to our side. It seems like we are expected to reclaim and use these resources when the supplies from Undercity or Silvermoon run out or are insufficient. That is not an entirely unwarranted idea, but it feels like the sort of idea drafted back in the relative safety of Silvermoon, ignorant of the actual dangers and threat here in the Ghostlands. It actually makes me wonder if maybe that was a political decision. A compromise needed to get approval for the initial supplies and troops for this expedition. A case like, hey, we need our initial supplies, but after that, we'll be able to somewhat self-sufficiently supply ourselves once we've reclaimed enough territory. That's a reasonable argument to win over doubters who don't want to risk the limited supplies Silvermoon already has. Coupled with the promises of the Forsaken, it seems like quite a plausible situation. But of course, that leaves us as the poor schmuck who gets to go reclaim the death mines from the grumpy gnolls, not to mention whatever else may be over there. I am quite curious how the gnolls are surviving, though presumably not all that well given the circumstances. Once we get over there, we'll see if we can find anything that might indicate why they moved on those mines now, how they're surviving the Scourge, and what we can tell about their society here in Quel'Thalas if enough of it remains. Another Forsaken, Deathstalker Rathiel, has orders for us to begin the direct efforts against the Scourge. A nice simple assault. Go out into the Scar and start wiping out entire swaths of the undead. They have a lot of bony boys, but as we have discussed, they're not truly unlimited. Rathiel also tells us he'll put in a good word for us if we prove our worth to the forces here. This is interesting since it would primarily be the Sindori meritocracy he would be putting in that good word with. I'm not entirely sure how much weight the Elves would put on the recommendation of a Forsaken, Deathstalker or otherwise. I suppose if our good agent here ever ends up in the lands of the Forsaken, then it might be helpful though. I am also curious about the rank Rathiel and Maltendis have. Deathstalker. Coupled with Mavrin's title, High Executor, it almost seems like a bit of dead humor, using ranks that all reference the life-challenged nature of their forces. It seems like the Forsaken in general are more willing to work with us since we proved ourselves with the Shadowpine Trolls, perhaps Apothecary Venustus put in that good word. One of his peers, Apothecary Renzithen, is working on researching the plague used here in the Ghostlands in search of a cure. He needs samples from other creatures to see how they are affected, ranging from simple to complex life forms. It seems like some insight might come from a very unlikely source, Murlocs. Along the coast, their villages have become blighted and undead, but seemingly retained their free will. The apothecary needs to know what makes these so-called lowly mongrels so special. If we can collect some of their spines as samples, he can study their bone marrow for some insights on how the plague may work. It is extremely interesting to note that the Forsaken seem to be interested in curing the plague, though that seems a noble goal for their apothecary society. I am also very interested in hearing his conclusions with the Murlocs. His methods are brutal, let's go steal some spines, boys! But we may gain some incredibly valuable insights from his research. It does absolutely fall into ends justify the means, a theme we've seen a bit with the Elves, but very strongly in our few interactions with the Forsaken so far. It also seems like those Forsaken forces have put up a bounty poster for 2 elite Scourge enemies, the abominations Knucklerot and Luzron. These are dangerous foes, and it is interesting that the forces here have opted to try to outsource their demise. They can't risk the losses, so it's better for them to get some independent agents to take this one on. And last but most certainly not least here in Tranquillion, we are approached by Master Chef Muldir, who appears to be the personal chef of Dame Auriferous. Personally, I find this even more compelling evidence that she is a noble. Bring out your personal chef out here is some pretty privileged behavior. The chef lets us know he finds it intolerable. He has nothing to work with here. When his lady asked him to come down from Silvermoon, he agreed as she deserves a cuisine befitting of her station. He needs us to go acquire some fresh kills so he actually has something to prepare. Evidently, the dame prefers a crunchy texture to her food, so Muldir's solution is for us to go hunt down some more of the spindleweb lurkers. Hey, like lobster. We have a lot of new objectives here, and our campaign is progressing. We are continuing Auriferous' strategy of consolidation by moving to clear the next village, Golden Mist. However, we also have a number of objectives from the Forsaken as well. They appear to be hyper-focused on solving the Scourge problem, though at least in a way that is not contrary to the Dame's strategy. It sounds like a compromise was reached. They can focus on the Scourge, thinning out their numbers and securing the immediate area against their incursions. It seems like we as an agent are also being trusted more by the Tranquillion Combined Task Force and being given more and more objectives of our own. We even have a promising lead to chase down in terms of the Plague. Those Murlocs are indeed fascinating. We're heading out from Tranquillion into the Scar and the areas to the northwest. We could call this the Northwest Expedition, and hopefully we won't encounter any lonely cairns of stone. There are a lot of threats and objectives out here to take care of. But first, we're going to head down the hill to the Scar and start beating off the Scourge. Wait, no. We're going to go take their bones. No, that's not right. We are going to stop the Scourge from making our doorstep a raveyard. The Forsaken called the police on the party, and we're here to break it up. While we're down here, we're also going to look for the 2 big boys, Knucklerot and Luzron. Most of the partygoers appear to be risen hungerers, tanky zombies that resist arrest well but don't do much damage on their own. The gangled cannibals are more dangerous, and I have to say that is a gnarly name for a death metal band. When these 2 units are combined, they make an effective force to hold territory. Individually, they're very much not dangerous, but when you get swarmed by the ganglers here, it really puts a damper on the show. This is a further part of the Scourge strategy, it seems. A variety of undead raised in different ways or with different focuses, all supporting each other. The Phantasmal Watchers seem to be the spooky scouts for the main force, and are halfway dangerous shadowcasters on their own. While clearing through the Zombros here, we can collect their rotting hearts. I'm not entirely sure why we felt the need to rip these out, but we do, so we're going to collect them. Obviously, somebody is going to want these, right? While we're down here, we can find one of the 2 abominations patrolling across the Scar. Knucklerot hits hard. This one feels more like a living or unliving siege weapon that can spit a corrosive acidic poison. We collect his enlarged head for science. We can also find his buddy Luzron nearby. He opts to huck naps across the field and feels like something of a a line breaker. With his head collected, we have the pair and can return to Deathstalker Rathiel with the good news that the party is over. The Deathstalker congratulates us, but seems more reserved than I would have expected for how successful we just were. I wonder if he sees these as temporary or even pointless victories, given how much the Forsaken wanted to proceed with things. In any case, he tells us he will let us know if he has any more directives. Before we can head out from Tranquillion again, Magistrix Aminel back up in the inn has a job for us. She will take those rotten hearts we've collected. See, we did find somebody who is weird enough to want them. She tells us that many advantages can be gained from a deeper understanding of your enemy. The more we learn about the Scourge, the better prepared we are to fight them. She wants us to collect more rotting hearts as well as the spinal dust from the skeletons in the Scar. With these, she can produce some powerful elixirs to boost our combat effectiveness against the Scourge. That is quite interesting and may give us some more insight into how the Magisters go about fighting a conflict. We heard from Dorenis that they wanted the arcane residue from the Sanctum. Now they want various body parts from the Scourge. Apart from filling up a Victorian antiquarian's curio cabinet, the Magisters seem to want these items to study and understand their foe more fully. So far, we know the Rangers prefer to be able to keep their foes off balance with raids, sabotage, and assassination. From what we're hearing of the Magisters, they seem to prefer to wait, collect information and body parts, and study their foe before striking. While we've not seen too much of this yet, let's keep it in mind as we go forward and see what these Magisters want from us. We head back out from Tranquillion, rested and recovered, to clear another swath of Scourge for Magistrix Ominel, focusing on the zombified Hungerers and the Skeletal Bone Brigade for their component pieces. We clear through an enormous number of them here. Relatively few of these Scourge varieties we are targeting seem to have acceptable hearts or spinal dust. I'm not sure what that says about their construction or the perfection being requested by the Magisters, but we stick with it and eventually collect what we need. While we're out here, we also investigate the area just across the scar that Rathus Toomber indicated was the site of his lost wagon. Approaching it, we can find more fans of that death metal band, this time the Gangled Flesh Eaters. Tearing through the fans, we get to the wagon and recover his lost supplies. Mosh pits have really gone downhill since my last concert. While we're out here, we also make sure to hunt down some of the local spider population for their crunchy legs. I really hope we can rebrand these as Terra Lobsters or something so that the dame never learns just what part we played in this culinary disaster piece. More than anything else though, I hope these aren't carrying the plague in their hydraulic appendages. That would be a hilarious if unfortunate way to end the Tranquillion Combined Task Force. On that note, these spiders do not appear to be the plagued ones that the Rangers asked us to take out, so maybe we're good. Checking out our map here, we still need to investigate the Kaldorei shenanigans at Andoroth. We were told they were messing with one of our all-important leyline nexus points, and we'd rather not have any Night Elves doing that when we need those to not go insane from mana hunger. That does raise a question about whether or not the Darnashian intruders back in Eversong were truly innocent of messing with the overloaded Sanctum. If they're poking our ley lines out here, I wonder if that may have contributed to the problem back up there. Making our approach to Andoroth, we find that the Sentinel spies here are as aggressive as those intruders. They have absolutely no inhibitions attacking us on sight, and are certainly not helping us against the Scourge. So we decide to make a full assault on the camp to clear it out. It looks like they were settling in for some sort of extended stay. They have a lot of supplies, as well as tents set up around what looks like some sort of spell focus. We can't identify what it was doing, but given we were told this was a leyline nexus, I'm going to assume it can't be good. It is very clear from these interactions that the Sindori and Kaldorei have no love lost between them. We haven't yet investigated Kaldorei culture, but we can get a number of inferences from how these Sindori interact with them. So far, almost every time the Blood Elves address their presence, they call them conceited or arrogant. They certainly view the Kaldorei as sanctimonious, and we can infer that they think of them as close-minded and even old-fashioned from how they discuss them. We don't find much else to explain their presence or actions here at Andoroth, but at least we've stopped whatever it is they were doing. From here, our next objective is Golden Mist Village, arguably our primary goal up in the northwest here. Golden Mist from the outskirts looks much like Suncrown, though without the immense tree at its heart and slightly fewer spiders. We cross the river and make our approach, careful not to alert too many of the angry spirits. This village, much like Suncrown, looks to be ornate and quite well off. The large fountain at its heart suggests a potentially very different focus than that of Suncrown, though the material culture otherwise looks much the same. As we clear out many of the angry spirits, it is remarkable just how many undead we have faced so far. Despite all of the martial and magical mastery of the elves, they could not hold off the Scourge invasion, and even just dealing with these remains and essentially a garrison force, we have already fought more Scourge than the entire number of living elves we have seen. With this village secure though, we get ready for the last part of our northwestern expedition. We are about to reach the sea, and with it the plagued murlocs that are undead but have retained their free will. Lewis and Clark have no idea what they're about to encounter. Reaching the coast, we can find their coastal homes looking worn and damaged. lacking the vibrancy we saw back north with the living Murlocs. Clearly, being undead did affect their quality of unlife, a bit. It takes a surprising number of Murlocs to collect the full amount of preserved spines that the apothecary wanted. I really feel like the amount of ends justifying means going on here is quite brutal. With the beach redecorated with undead Murloc bits ripped open out the back and many missing spines, we can return to Tranquillion having completed our northwestern expedition and reached the sea. Arcanist Vangel congratulates us on clearing Golden Mist. We have secured the northern flanks entirely now. Our next target is to the southwest in Windrunner Village. Apparently, it houses some of the more elite Scourge troops, and the Magisters at the Sanctum of the Sun want us to collect the remains of the gargoyles and shades there. They need those samples to further study the Scourge and hopefully find more creative ways to fight them. This gives us even more confirmation of the primary activities of the Magisters when out in the field: study and understanding. Once we get over there to the Sanctum of the Sun, we'll be sure to investigate this thread more fully. Next up, we report back to Rathus Tumber with his lost supplies. He comments that war zones can be such profitable places. It sounds like our Mountain Blade comparison was an apt one. He makes especially sure to pay us, which seems in keeping with his personality and social role, and mentions that Mavrin will be pleased to hear that supplies for fighting Darkon directly have arrived. Up the hill a little bit, we report to Chef Muldir with our terrestrial lobster legs. He tells us that these legs will have to do, and he absolutely does not want us to describe the terrestrial lobsters or how they crawled around. He will work his chef's magic on them to make a tasty meal fit for a queen, or in this case, a dame, as he jokes. While a fun little diversion, this does give us a little further insight into social roles for the Sindori who serve the nobility. Clearly, the chef is actually quite well respected, and reasonably so if he can turn crunchy terrestrial lobster legs into a delicacy. His service to Dame Auriferous seems to be an extreme point of pride for him. He is satisfied, but more than that, proud to serve such a noble. And speaking of high-ranking Sindori, we return to Magistrix Aminel with the requested Build-A-Scourge pieces. In exchange for these reagents, she hands us some of the specialty elixirs to improve our ability to combat the Scourge. She does mention she can supply more of these if we bring her more reagents. This must clearly be one of the main roles of the Magisters on campaign. They research, study, and seek understanding of their foes to find weaknesses they can exploit. While they are likely extremely powerful on their own, they seem to have a strong predilection towards clever, targeted actions rather than brute forcing through an opponent with their magic. I am beginning to form an understanding of the tactics that probably form the bulk of Quel'Dorai's strategy, especially in regards to the Rangers and Magisters. This early hypothesis is that in prolonged campaigns, the primary goal was for the Magisters to find a critical weakness or series of weaknesses that they could exploit. Once identified, they would then target these points to bring the enemy down, be it directly or indirectly. The role of the Rangers was to slow down the enemy, give the Magisters time to work and to research. They also seem to be responsible for collecting data on the enemy and area that was of use. All of our actions with the Rangers fit into this paradigm: weaken the enemy, keep them off balance, sabotage their supplies, and kill their leaders. This style of fighting, with a powerful, clever institution looking for a solution, while the mobile, agile institution slows down and weakens the enemy, would serve them well against traditional opponents like the Trolls. However, we know how catastrophically it failed against the Scourge. Whether from unfamiliarity with the undead and thus taking too long to find a targetable weakness, or through the overwhelming weight of the Scourge's full assault and their endless numbers, the Rangers seemingly could not buy the Magisters enough time. In the wake of that failure, another military group was formed, the Blood Knights. They are clearly a much heavier frontline force capable of going toe-to-toe with opponents. In this light, it seems extremely clear why they would see the need for such a force. The Guardians, and presumably the supporting arcane constructs, have primarily served as the main defensive force at critical infrastructure points like Tranquillion. They do not have the numbers or tactics to directly engage the enemy offensively. That was always the job of the Rangers. We're going to keep working on this hypothesis and see if we can learn any more about it as we progress through the Ghostlands. We see no Blood Knights down here, so this campaign certainly mirrors what I would have expected to see from the Quel'Dorai. Getting back to our debriefings with the folks here in Tranquillion, Apothecary Renzithan thanks us for our collection of Murloc spines. He tells us that once his name spreads after he finds a cure for the plague, he will make sure to mention us, presumably as a second or third author. That is very interesting and probably a good hint at Forsaken, or specifically Apothecary, cultural norms. The support of your peers in an academic sense is probably critical to their success and ability to prove themselves. We have already encountered Master and Normal Apothecaries, so presumably there is some academic ranking structure here. Lastly, we report into Dame Auriferous herself. The campaign is coming along quite nicely, but she is currently quite concerned with the Night Elves. They were a surprise variable not factored into the original game plan, and she is disappointed we were unable to find any hints as to their plans at Andaroth. That magical focus they seemingly grew atop the ley line is very concerning to her, and she wants us to do some much more direct information gathering. For our next mission, we are to head to Shalandis Isle directly and recover any plans there. This location is seemingly their staging ground and landing point as their ship is docked there. High Executor Mavrin jumps in once we are done with Auriferous. He wants us to add a task to our retaking of Windrunner Village. That task is to retake Windrunner Spire, the former home of Lady Sylvanas Windrunner and her family before she became just slightly less alive. The noble estate that is the Spire has been overrun by the Scourge, and retaking it would doubtless be both a symbolic victory as well as a useful strategic one. Really kick the Scourge out of the western portion of the Ghostlands. So that brings us to the Western Front, where all is not quiet. We are heading out from Tranquillion towards the Sanctum of the Moon first. Here, Magister Dorenus wants us to recover the arcane residue from the anomalous entities surrounding the ruined sanctum. We sprint across the still dangerous scar to find those arcane entities are called Arcane Devourers, and they look quite reminiscent of those we've seen before around malfunctioning or destroyed Sindori arcane equipment. There also appears to be a number of arcane shifters, rogue mana worms from the looks of them. We're able to collect a crystallized mana essence from them, a material that is presumably quite useful to the Magisters in their pursuit of knowledge and advantage. I do wonder if the ley lines here have been distorted and corrupted like the one passing through the Scourged Sanctum back in Eversong. That one was directly in the scar, however, while the Sanctum of the Moon here appears to have just barely avoided that fate. From the ruined sanctum, we are heading into the surrounding haunted woods near the two Scourge ziggurats to hunt plague spiders. I wonder if this proximity to the scar or the Scourge structures is what has corrupted and plagued these spiders, since seemingly the ones we just hunted north of here were fine, relatively speaking. These spiders are extremely elusive, and it takes us quite a while to hunt them all down. Hopefully, with this last plagued species hunted to extinction, the rangers can rest easy knowing the plagued wildlife is at least contained. While we were stalking the spiders, we also encountered some of the Black Pond gnolls we were warned about. They look to be in extremely poor health, suffering from skin lesions. I would hypothesize they may be feeling the effects of the plague and are infected themselves. That raises a question of whether or not they are actually already under Scourge control. They appear to be alive, at least mostly or technically, and not truly dead, but we know the Scourge still employs some mortal forces as well. Corrupting, plaguing, and manipulating local threats like these gnolls may be an attempt to recoup some of the losses we have forced onto the Scourge, especially targeting an important location like the mines. Alternatively, if the gnolls are trying to resist the Scourge, they may have taken the mines to try to resupply and rearm themselves. Regardless, our job is to clear them out, no questions asked. The Forsaken forces do not care why the gnolls are here, only that they have disrupted the flow of ore. Near the entrance to the pit mine proper, we can find a living elf, Apprentice Shatharia. She tells us she was sent by the Magisters at the Sanctum of the Sun to collect some ore samples, and was driven off by the gnolls. It will be her head on a platter if she doesn't get those samples back to the Magisters soon. So there's some even more confirmation of the strategy of the Magisters. I wonder if they're studying the corruption of the terrain of the land itself, and looking into ways to improve metals against the Scourge. Regardless, we can get those ore samples for the apprentice. Heading into the mines proper, we encounter some stronger gnoll fighters, shamans, and scavengers. They appear to be working the mines to some degree, though most are camped outside the actual entrances into the earth. These mines don't look particularly professional nor ornate, unlike what we might expect from these Sindori. In fact, they look more like natural caverns the elves found and were extracting the ore from. In any case, we clear out the knolls and recover a number of ore samples from them. Our next objective and primary target is Windrunner Village. It is the largest village we have encountered so far and is filled with gargoyles and shades. I am curious about the name. Clearly, it was named after the Windrunner family in some capacity and their nearby noble estate. What was their relationship to the estate here in the village, though? We don't find a lot of hints from the remaining material culture. From what we have previously encountered of Blood Elven social norms, though, they seem quite fond of heroic individuals and stories. It may well be that the Windrunner family has been an important fixture in the local area, and drew many common families into the village here. I do wonder if the Windrunner family owned the charter for this village. Again, we don't have enough information from the village itself to know for sure. It could be that the village was owned and run by the family, or was a more organic settlement that popped up effectively under their influence and name. We clear through the gargoyles and shades, making sure to collect as many good samples for the magisters as we can. Overhead, we can feel the looming presence of the spire, though. Making our way up the breathtaking, if dangerous path, we encounter fallen rangers in thrall to the Scourge, as well as Deatholme acolytes. I would imagine their holding of this location, and shackling banshees specifically here, was very intentional, and as much to send a message as it was strategic to their holding of the region. One of the Scourge troops drops a lost necklace that does not seem to entirely succumb to the glue of the Ghostlands. Reading the inscription on it, this seems to have belonged to Lady Sylvanas Windrunner herself. We should probably bring it back to the Forsaken command at Tranquillion. There are a number of interesting notes and thoughts on the estate here. Firstly, it has a number of what appear to be living cultists of the Scourge, members of the Cult of the Damned. I would hypothesize these cultists are mortal worshippers of death magic, presumably seeking power or immortality as servants of Darkon here in the Ghostlands. Most of them appear to be humans. I would wonder if these were survivors of Lordaeron who either betrayed their people or survived by swearing fealty. The Scourge seems to operate as much on breaking morale as killing opponents. Turning mortals to their service would not be difficult. The structure of the estate itself is also interesting. It is a very tall tower, fitting neatly in with the themes of Sindori and tall buildings indicating status. We can assume from this that the Windrunner family was extremely important, even if we did not already know this from their holding the position of Ranger General. Much of the structure actually overhangs the ocean and attaches to the coastal cliff here. There are numerous clearly magical arcing walkways. These combine the height and status comparison with the themes of a more overtly magical structure, meaning more power and influence. This estate screams status and power to all Sindori. It is also interesting to note in that it is one of the slightly more defensible buildings we have seen. It has a single approach vector up a narrow cliff road, and I wonder if the Windrunners, being so much more martial and closer to the border of the nation, were more concerned with defense. This location is interesting in other ways, though. It is far from Silvermoon in what seems like a very conscious decision. Picking this location for your noble estate and seat of power is a statement that you are separated from the intrigues and power struggles of the city in some ways, but still indelibly tied to them in others. But with the spire retaken and the village cleared, we move on to our last objective of the Western Front. Heading up the debris-filled coastline from Windrunner Estate, we eventually reach the narrow strait that separates us from Shalandis Isle. This small island looks like it currently plays host to several Kaldorei camps as well as the dock for their vessel. The Darnashian forces here are extremely hostile to us and attack on sight, much like the detachments we have encountered in Eversong and at Androth. I assume this serves as the base of operations for those detachments, from the spies and scouts in Eversong to the currently unknown objective at that ley line. They seem to have a lot of supplies and forces here settled in for an extended deployment. We face down sentinels, archers, and druids on the island. They have quite the operation going here, even a moonwell setup. Most impressively, it looks like they physically grew watchtowers in the silty sand of the shore to keep an eye out. While raiding their setup, we can find 2 maps and the associated plans to spy on the Blood Elves. Most notably, however, we find plans to use the, direct quote here, high elf moon crystals to scry on the Sindori. We'll get back to that exact terminology since I think there might have been a bit of an oopsie with the naming. We have encountered very few Quel'Dorei and Sindori items named after the moon. Really just the Sanctum of the Moon and Silver Moon itself, but we'll keep an eye out just to see. The Quel'Dorei clearly distrust their Sindori cousins, and so far we have seen them having a very almost paternalistic and arrogant attitude towards them. In this case, it looks to have led to direct action and hostility. The Night Elves here have no problems killing Sindori who wander close. For their tactics, the Quel'Dorei seem to favor skirmishing weapons like bows, resorting to spears and the like at closer ranges. When outmatched, they will retreat to try to regain tactical advantage. With the intelligence recovered from Shalandis Isle, that has completed our time on the Western Front. We return to Tranquillion across the now familiar haunted landscape, careful to avoid any of the lingering threats. We first report to Magister Dorenis with the collected crystallized mana essence. He comments that these are extremely powerful and complements our work. It is of course further evidence that the Magisters focus on knowledge of their enemy and will utilize oddities, curios, or otherwise indirect means to engage them. Across Eversong and the Ghostlands, we have seen a strong reluctance for Magisters to directly engage in conflict, whether because they are elite individuals whom the Elves are loath to risk in the chaos of combat, or because their mana is a resource not well spent on direct combat. Both of these explanations seem to match what we have seen and would very easily go hand in hand. Reporting in to Dame Auriferous with the intelligence from Shalandis, she comments that these plans do show what we saw at Andoroth. However, they also show activity at Anowen, a more remote leyline nexus to our southeast. She herself also knows of a third nexus on Telos that is not mentioned in these plans, and now she has a bad feeling about all of this. She gives us the task of delivering these Night Elf plans to Antelos, as there is a Magister named Silastor there conducting studies on the leyline nexus points for use against the Scourge. If there is a threat from the Quel'Dorei, we need to warn him. He might also be able to tell us what it is that they are actually up to. Speaking with Executor Mavrin before we head out, he mentioned that Sylvanas will be pleased we reclaimed her former family home. He makes sure to pay us for our work. This is in stark difference to how the Sindori handle objectives and agent relationships. Some of the Forsaken, especially the Apothecaries, focus on telling us that they will bolster our reputation and that we will go far. This facet of Forsaken society seems to care much more about social rank and status, much like the Sindori. Many of the others, especially the more martial branches, focus on payment in coin for tasks. They almost treat us more like the mercenary role we saw in Elwyn Forest with the Kingdom of Stormwind. Mavrin seems to pause for a moment when we show him the necklace, but also pays us for recovering it. He tells us that the full inscription states that this was a gift to Sylvanas from her long-lost sister Ilaria. The High Executor recommends we bring it to Sylvanas in the Undercity ourselves, utilizing the Orb of Translocation in Silvermoon. We'll get to that later, but it is interesting that we seem to have direct access to Sylvanas. I wonder if that is due to our recognition by Sindori circles, as well as the good word of Mavrin and his subordinates here. Speaking of those subordinates, Deathstalker Maltendus tells us it was a fair job of butchery we did at the Underlight Mine, and now the miners can get back to work. He specifically mentions that there is armor and weapons to be made, so clearly this mine was used by the martial forces here as we suspected. Further, he makes sure to pay us for the job. Again, the martial Deathstalkers care a lot more about that payment in gold, while the apothecaries in their academic pursuits care more about reputation and the endorsement of another scholar. Lastly, we report into Arcanist Vandrel about Windrunner Village and the reagents for the Magisters from the Shades and Gargoyles there. He thanks us and states that the damned Magisters over at the Sanctum of the Sun have been berating him for Scourge remains. He will handle them for us though. He tells us we don't need to worry about that, we took our time and we got the job done right. I am more and more curious about Vandrel's role here and social position broadly. I wonder if taking a job under a noble house might be seen as dropping out or otherwise admitting to a lower rank on the meritocracy. Most of the other Arcanists seem to be serving specifically a Magister directly, and on the track to become Magisters themselves. He goes out of his way to compliment us on breaking the Scourge hold on all 3 villages. We have cleared the flanks and made sure we can focus our forces on Deatholme. But before we can head out of Tranquillion to report back to the Rangers about the spider population controls, Magister Dorenus pulls us aside once more. He reiterates what we already knew, that the Magisters have rebuilt the Sanctum of the Sun. However, he also further clarifies that they plan to launch the assault on Deatholme from there. He wants to make sure we are there to be
the tip of the Horde spear, no greater honor.
We'll make sure to check in with them as well as the Farstriders. We also need to check in with Magister Silastor at Leyline Untellas. There's no use kicking the Scourge out of the Ghostlands. If we lose the Ghostlands or their magical ley lines, then to the Night Elves. We take a high path along the fringes of Sungray's Peak out of Tranquillion. This looks like an old hidden path out of town. I wonder if this was actually an old Amani or Shadowpine path repurposed by the Elves. Approaching Untellas, we can see a number of Kaldorai tents, but also a bunch of smoking bodies. Further in, we spot multiple Tranquillion scouts flanking Magister Silastor. It looks like our warning came too late, but they were able to hold here regardless. I am kind of curious about these Tranquillion scouts. Usually the Elves demarcate their forces like this as Rangers or Farstriders. I wonder if these might actually be House Auriferous troops directly sent by the Dame. Speaking with Magister Silastor, he mentions that it was just horrible. Night Elves implanted their moon crystal here for some nefarious plot, and he had to sneak away to gather the scouts and magisters from the Sanctum to clear them out. So clearly, the magisters do not mess around when they need to get directly involved, if the smoking, wrecked bodies around here are any indication. He mentions that the other forces are spread out hunting down the remaining Kaldorai that fled the scene. These 2 scouts were left to protect Silastor and the Nexus. He seems more like a researcher and less like a combatant. He takes a look at the Night Elf plans we have on us to see if he can figure out what they were up to. We can also get some confirmation here that there was a bit of an oopsie with the naming back on Shalandis Isle. Here, the crystals are referred to as Night Elf moon crystals, not High Elf moon crystals. Somebody got their elves mixed up, it seems. While Silastor is piecing together the Night Elf plans, we are ambushed by a pair of huntresses on night sabers that evidently managed to slip away from their pursuers. We fend them off, and Silastor tells us that the Kaldorai plan to use the moon crystals to spy on the Sindorai magically. He suspects that the other leyline points don't have the magical power left to actually do that, however. Only an Owen to our south could actually fully operate one of these crystals. From the plans that we recovered, it looks like a form of control orb is held by the Kaldorai that can deactivate the moon crystals. We need to investigate that third leyline nexus, and if they are messing with it, deactivate their doohickey. Before we make our way south, we check in with the Farstriders over at their launch to see how they are holding up and if they are ready to assist with Deatholme. They don't mention anything about any Kaldorai, but do compliment us on our courage and determination to clear out the plagued animals. It seems like they should be clear to assist with Deatholme, so we prioritize finishing off the Kaldorai problem before we can join that assault as well. Making our way south to An Owen, we can see that the Night Elves have indeed already grown their moon crystal scrying podium thingy. We start picking off Sentinel infiltrators to find the one that has the control orb. The forces here have another pile of supplies. Like the other camps, they seem to be settling in for an extended deployment. I do wonder how they were planning on keeping these relatively large-scale operations a secret. Were they hoping to hide in the chaos of the conflict here, utilizing the fog of war? After clearing through a hilarious number of sentinels, we eventually find the one with the orb and use it to disable the moon crystal. Scuttling across the landscape back to Magister Silastor at Antellas, he congratulates us and confirms that we have allowed the Sindorai to avoid being surrounded by enemies, with one of them able to spy on their every move. Now, at last, we head on over to the Sanctum of the Sun to check in with the Magisters there and their research into how we end this campaign against Deatholme. We can find one Magister Kendris that seems to be in charge of the group here. He tells us that the Ghostlands will not be won by military force alone. That is where the Magisters come in. Their guile and knowledge of the arcane are unmatched. That is some pretty direct confirmation from Kendris here of our hypothesis. The Magisters are the primary but indirect force of the Sindori, and their efforts to uncover clever magical solutions to problems and conflicts is the ultimate goal of any campaign. The other forces, the Rangers, the Guardians, and in this case the Forsaken, it seems, all exist to protect the Magisters and buy them time to research and put together a solution. While here we turn in the ore samples from the Underlight mine to Magister Qualestis. He expresses his frustration to us that his apprentice was unable to take care of it herself, nulls or not. He will have to have a word with her, but thinks that she will be a handful and be difficult to properly train. He further clarifies that they are hoping to find some magical or special property from the ore samples that will aid against the Scourge, much as Kendris has already elucidated to us. More surprisingly, he also made sure to note paying us for bringing the samples, which is very unusual for the Sindori. From what we have seen here and in Eversong, I wonder if he felt the need to do this since this task was not assigned to us originally but to his apprentice. Since we took on the task for her and went out of our meritocracy assigned role to do so, we needed to be paid for our work. Up top of the sanctum, we also check in with Magister Idonis, the Magister that Doranus wanted us to meet here. Interestingly, Idonis seems reluctant to speak or deal with us until we mention that Doranus sent us. At this point, he mentions that he supposes that they could use our aid. That is a rather interesting behavior. It's not until we can present a recommendation from a peer of his, in this case another Magister, that Idonis is willing to consider us for service. That is confirmation that the meritocracy confers favor upon agents by the higher-ranking individuals they serve. Having an unfit or incapable agent under you is a loss of status, so Idonis will not consider us unless he knows we are fit to be his agent. While discussing with Idonis, Kendris from the ground floor calls us over. He mentions that while the Rangers and Magisters don't always see eye to eye, they are in agreement that some way to find Darkon and his legions must be found. To that end, they have received a report from Ranger Vinna at the Farstrider Enclave that they have found some useful information. Kendris wants us to go and meet with them since we have worked so much with the Rangers before. We make our way over to the Enclave to meet with Ranger Vinna. She recaps much of what we already know, that Darkon Drathir returned from the dead to take command of the Scourge armies here in the Ghostlands. In the past, he had allied with the Scourge and betrayed his people, us, the Sindori, but was once a living, breathing elf. He spent much of his time at a remote tower named the Dawnstar Spire, scheming. Vinna suspects that we can find some useful information in this tower, northeast of here and bordering troll territory. It's no wonder nobody has tried to reach it and study it before now. Until we cleared out the area, this area was firmly under the control of the Shadowpine, and very remote from any elven garrisons or forces. We can see the silent, now dead village of Zebsora in the distance as we approach Darkon's old hideaway. There are a whole bunch of hostile arcane constructs, termed as arcane reavers by the game, holding the grounds. Presumably, these were placed here by Darkon to protect his old haunt. Fighting through the Robo-Reavers, we make our way into the spire. On one of the upper floors, we can find exactly what we were hoping for, an old journal of the traitors. As we crack it open to take a peek, we are overcome by the sensation of being watched. That's not a great sign. The journal itself outlines how Darkon was filled with hatred and contempt for his own people. He even outlines many of his plots and machinations within its dusty pages. There is too much here for us to make much sense of right now, especially with more angry Robocops banging on the doors behind us. We stuff the journal away and make our dynamic exit from the tower. Returning to the Enclave, Ranger Vinna feels vindicated by our find. The journal will indeed be extremely useful. The Sindori, of course, knew of Darkon's original plot to steal the power of the Sunwell for the Scourge. However, this journal outlines many other plots that will doubtless expand what we know about the traitor. We should take it to the Magisters at the Sanctum of the Sun since it will undoubtedly help them with their search for a weakness to exploit. Vinna also tells us that the Magisters there have made great progress in finding those weaknesses with the help of the Forsaken, an extra bit of clarification on how the Rangers and Magisters interact. The Magisters seemed a bit more dismissive of the Rangers, but the other way around, the Rangers speak of the Magisters with a great deal more respect. Regarding us feeling that watchful sensation, Vinna tells us that Darkon is cunning and likely watching our every move. We need to be both quick and careful with our next moves. With that in mind, we skedaddle back to the sanctum. Magister Kendris flips through the journal, not even remarking on the role of the Rangers in finding it. He identifies one plot in particular that stands out to him. Evidently, the traitor promised the Scourge two powerful artifacts, the Stone of Light and the Stone of Flame. These were supposedly imbued with the power of the Sunwell and attuned against the Scourge in the original invasion. According to the journal, these were transported to the two Scourge ziggurats on the Dead Scar, noted as the Howling and Bleeding ziggurats respectively. Quite original. Kendris had thought the stones lost and believes they will be immensely useful against the Scourge if we are able to recover them. While making our way over to the Scar, carefully, to avoid Darkon's watchful gaze, we pass by the old Andillian estate, presumably an old noble estate out in the country here. We can find an apprentice Vorel standing watch. Once again, carefully introducing ourselves since he seems a bit suspicious out here by himself, he tells us that Kendris sent him out here to establish an advance outpost against the Scourge. Evidently though, Vorel has learned the mighty power of delegation, especially in matters that endanger your life. He delegates to us the task of clearing out the greater spindleweb spiders and glowsclaw ravagers lurking around the area. He offers us coin very directly, so this is obviously outside the normal confines of the meritocracy. He is breaking those traditions, so he needs to pay us to do this thing for him. There are a lot of threats to clear out, even for us. Much like the apprentice sent to the Underlight Mine to get those ore samples, the expectation of the Magisters seems to just be figure it out, numbnuts. They don't accept excuses or failure. You succeed or you don't make it. I do wonder if the apprentices out here in the Ghostlands are perhaps more experienced. They are being assigned tasks not far below what we ourselves can accomplish. They seem to be expected to handle themselves much better, and it would make sense not to bring truly green apprentices like those we encountered back in Eversong down into the middle of an undead active war zone. That being said, we could also be encountering the Magister version of what we saw with good old Lieutenant Tomathrin and the Rangers. With the scale of death and destruction from the original invasion, the Magisters may be pushing up apprentices into more senior roles that they're not ready for. Oh well, we're being paid cash, so we make sure to give apprentice Vorel his money's worth. With a pile of dead spiders and lynxes behind us, and the Andillian estate theoretically secured, he tells us he doesn't want to head into the woods this close to Deatholme. No kidding. We continue on to the ziggurats and the Dead Scar. They look like they were set up as forward outposts to defend Deatholme, and an easy place to secure the Scar from. Fighting into the first one, the Howling Ziggurat, we find the Stone of Flame being channeled upon by an array of cultists. We clear through them alongside Naps, who seems to really enjoy chewing through enemies that haven't been entirely sauced with the plague. Charging into the second, the Bleeding Ziggurat, such creative names the Scourge use, we find the rare spawn Dr. Witherlin. He yells at us that he wants our organs. After politely informing him that that's workplace harassment, we remove his organs instead, as well as the Stone of Light. Redecorated in the remains of a variety of cultists and Scourge, we return to Magister Kendris. It seems like we are absolutely fulfilling the hypothetical role we surmised of the poor schmuck who gets to acquire research material and data for the Magisters. Wonderful. At least we're good at it. He is elated to learn that the journal was correct and these stones did in fact still exist. He plans to use their combined power, originally from the uncorrupted Sunwell, to create weapons for use against Darkon. Using one of these manufactured weapons when the time is right will release the energy of the Sunwell stored within, vanquishing Darkon with the very power he sought to steal from the Sindori. Poetic. And now the time has come. Kendris restates our mission here. Everything we have accomplished so far in the Ghostlands over this long campaign has been to take back what is rightfully ours. The Scourge have held this land for far too long already. It's time for some payback. With the aid of the Forsaken, vengeance will be ours. We are tasked with heading straight into Deatholme, the stronghold of the Scourge here in the Ghostlands, and taking out Darkon. If we can accomplish this, our deeds will go down in the history of the Sindori, as Kendris tells us. His peer Idonis has a much more straightforward request: bring destruction to the elite forces in the Scourge fortress. He outlines that Darkon's lieutenants command the armies against their dwindling numbers. Massafet the Black, Jurian the Deceiver, Borgoth the Bloodletter, and Mirdoran the Fallen. These lieutenants are second only to Darkon himself, and if we take them out, we will throw the remaining Scourge forces into disarray. One of the Arcanists working for the Magisters here, Arcanist Janeda, hands us a restorative draught. Made with the combination of the research of the Magisters and the alchemy of the Forsaken, this draught can breach the Scourge's own alchemy. We are to use it on our own forces that have been captured in Deatholme. Evidently, it has a list of side effects to rival even a modern medication commercial. I can't speak quite that quickly, so we'll instead let the rescued elves worry about these side effects themselves. I'm sure they'll be fine. Well, it's time. We're ready to go, and our forces are assembled. We're the tip of the spear, being sent in to eliminate Darkon with a weapon devised by the Magisters to finish him off especially. Hopefully for good. We make our way inside the fortress, relying upon speed and surprise. Deatholme has a mixture of all of the types of Scourge we have fought up until this point. Clearly, this is indeed their staging ground and headquarters. While once this must have been an elven town or citadel, it has been entirely rebuilt as a Scourge fortress. We can see slaughterhouses, a necropolis, crypts, plague cauldrons, and more. Everything here is fully corrupted and twisted into a deathly form. We see a lot of shades noted as Eyes of Darkon, clearly the spooky spies he's been keeping watch on us and other allied forces with. We make sure to close the eyes, as it were. Scattered around the various structures of Deatholme, we can find many of the prisoners taken by the Scourge. It looks like they were either being tortured for information or for some messed up ritual purpose. It is somewhat unclear given our relative lack of knowledge on Scourge magic. Luckily, the restorative draught we have works to get the prisoners moving again. We make a note to ask them later about those side effects. It looks like we were able to rescue a ranger, an apprentice, and a forsaken apothecary. Luckily, our draught even works on the undead themselves. We fight our way through Deatholme utilizing every advantage we have and all of the knowledge we have gained of the Scourge to tear through their forces. Even with all of those advantages, there are still a lot of enemies and we could be hard-pressed. But this is the strength of the Quel'Dorei, and now Sin'dorei, way of fighting. When you find your enemy's weaknesses, your strikes are devastating. Unfortunately, it just took them too long to turn it against the Scourge to stop the initial invasion. We find and take out all of Darkon's lieutenants, weakening the Scourge. It is time for us to now hunt down Darkon himself and put an end to this. In the central necropolis, the Tower of the Damned, we descend deep into the ground. Here, sequestered away with his necromancers, we find the traitor hiding. It is a brutal fight, but with the power of the Sunwell, a remnant of that lost relic and reminder of the suffering of the Sin'dorei, we are able to strike him down once and for all. Just for good measure, we also remove his head. You never know when those field goals come a-calling. The day is won, at least for now. Our penultimate goal has been completed. The Scourge here in the Ghostlands are all but defeated. We depart the corrupted fortress, though it's still surrounded by many of the now leaderless undead. It is time for us to return to Magister Kendris with the head of the traitor. He rewards us with another blessed weapon, one to represent our rank and merit. He returns the head to us though, then tells us it is the signifier of a new beginning. A new chapter for the Sin'dorei. Our lands will be reclaimed, and we shall cement the bonds with Sylvanas and her allies. Kendris wants us to present the head directly to Lorthamar Thuron, the Regent Lord in Silvermoon. He should be eager to hear the news. Nearby, Arcanist Janeda takes the last of the restorative draught from us and thanks us for our service, stating that without our aid, the prisoners would have lost both their minds and souls to the Scourge. Idonis, practical and straightforward, tells us that the Scourge have felt our wrath, and it will not be long before that cursed citadel lies fully in ruins. The weakened, leaderless Scourge cannot stand before the combined might of the Sin'dorei and the Forsaken. And now we are on our way back to Silvermoon to meet with Regent Lord Thuron. First though, we're on to Tranquillion, where we're going to catch a Dragonhawk flight back to the city. While we're on that flight, let's discuss our takeaways here. Carrying on from part 1, we are seeing a military campaign in the works. Specifically, we're seeing how the Quel'Dorei approached a protracted conflict, the likely same methodology that originally failed against the Scourge. Here though, it was able to succeed against a weakened version of that foe, and with more time to study and find their weaknesses. And finding those weaknesses is core. The Sin'dorei here in the Ghostlands approached the conflict with 3 distinct stages. The first was to take and hold an important central location, in this case Tranquillion. Of course, they could no longer do this on their own. Great assistance from the Forsaken, themselves former members of the Scourge, allowed them to succeed. Both with supplies and military aid, their presence in Tranquillion is what kept this campaign going. The second stage was for the Rangers and other available forces to weaken the Scourge, the Trolls, or any other threats and keep them off balance to buy time. Their methods are pragmatic, often brutal, but undeniably effective. They were successful in buying time for the third stage, research and identification of a vulnerability or weakness. The Magisters came in, studied the local area, the effects of the plague, the Scourge themselves, and the actions of Darkon. For our final assault on Deatholme, we were able to bring all of that knowledge to bear. We were armed with a specialty weapon capable of defeating the traitor himself, draughts to free and restore prisoners, elixirs to strengthen us against the Scourge, and more powerful weapons and armor to give us an edge. In the end, it wasn't really the raw martial strength, straight magical strength, or even the constant attacks of the Rangers. It was the guile and cunning of the Magisters, having researched and now understanding their hated foe, that brought us ultimate victory. Returning to our discussion of Dame Auriferous' overall campaign strategy, it seems obvious now that she was securing the flanks, reducing the threats Tranquillion faced, to buy time for the Magisters to do their work. We ourselves were often the primary instrument of that work towards the latter part of the campaign. We collected all sorts of random materials, from rocks to hearts and crystallized mana residue. With all of that collected data, the Magisters fight a war of information. The more they understand of their foe, the faster and better they can come up with ways to target their weaknesses or bolster our own force's strengths. Long term, this means that any foes that have spent a good deal of time fighting the Quel'Dorei are at a significant disadvantage. It is no wonder that the Shadowpine and other forest trolls have never had much success. The Elves know exactly how to fight against them from thousands of years of study. But this strategy may well be changing. Its severe drawbacks were all too apparent during the original Scourge invasion. It takes too much time. Fighting a relatively novel force like the Scourge, the Magisters were not able to find a good weakness to target in time. The Rangers, led by Sylvanas Windrunner, fought a brutal, heroic, but ultimately losing campaign of slowing and delaying actions. And ultimately it was not enough. Now the Sin'dorei are looking to other means as well. We have seen the rise of the Blood Knights, a much more direct frontline soldier than we have seen them use before. I also wonder if we will see a resurgence in use of the arcane constructs. They were old, almost defunct already, but now they may well be a critical part of their overall strategy. Further, I wonder if we will see societal shifts with this as well. So far, we have seen a strong reluctance from the Magisters to directly engage in combat. However, they are powerful, and their aid on the battlefield would be invaluable. More than that though, I wonder if the importance of the Rangers and Farstriders might decrease. While effective in their own right and having fought impossible odds, their role in the future conflicts may end up being decreased, because in their place we may see the Blood Knights rising to prominence, a stronger, more direct force able to go toe-to-toe with powerful foes, rather than doing their best CIA impression. We also saw much of the countryside of the Sin'dorei. We saw larger, more numerous villages here in the south, while in the north we saw smaller, more compact ones. We saw more noble estates like those of the Windrunners and Adendilion. Back north, we saw more centralized institutions, shipyards, academies, administration hubs. It gives the impression of a very centrally controlled society when close to the capital, but as you get farther away, you see more independence and probably more affordable living. Unfortunately, that affordable living did become affordable dying, but, paid less in rent. And we have now just reached Lorthamar. When presenting him with the head of Darkon, he comments that it was a face he did not expect to see for some time, but that it is extremely good news. He further elaborates for us that there were concerns amongst the factions of the Horde about the suitability and capability of these Sindori. With the reclamation of the Ghostlands and the death of Darkon unifying Quel'Thalas, we have proven our right to join the Horde properly. He hands us a letter he has written to this effect and wants us to take it to Sylvanas Windrunner herself for further confirmation. She is already on her side, but this will allay any remaining concerns, and she will likely send us on to Orgrimmar with her own recommendation. We are able to take the Orb of Translocation in the Spire that will send us to the Undercity. While we arrive at the haunted capital of the Forsaken, let's also briefly discuss our initial thoughts on them. We will get to Tiras Falls soon, but we had some interesting first impressions. For one, we can tell that they have a very ends justify the means mentality. This manifests both as a cavalier attitude towards casualties. They wanted to just make a direct outright assault on Deatholme, regardless of the cost. But it also manifests as a willingness to use just about any method and do just about anything to anyone who stands in their way. Trolls being a problem poison all of their food. Murlocs that are somehow resistant to the loss of individuality from undeath go become an impromptu chiropractor and perform radical spinal adjustments to get some study materials. Another fascinating facet we saw was a bit of a divide between an academic faction in the Apothecaries and their Royal Apothecary Society and the martial faction in the Deathstalkers. Forsaken Society is clearly not a monolith. They are deeply individualistic but follow broad strokes. The academic apothecaries care deeply about their reputation and scholarly accomplishments, often noting that in our service to them. The Deathstalkers, on the other hand, care much more about direct results and cold hard cash for cold hard work. We'll see if these observations hold up once we go looking at the spooky lanes, but here we are meeting Sylvanas. We are here to both hand her the letter from Lorthamar, but also to return her necklace. Regarding the first, Sylvanas is both impressed and pleased by the death of Darkon. She informs us she has lost none of her love for her homeland or its people, and has extensively argued for Silvermoon to be allowed a place alongside Undercity and Orgrimmar at the negotiating table. She adds her own seal to our letter and instructs us to take them on to Orgrimmar alongside the head of Darkon. He really is getting the cranial world tour here. I bet it's fun to explain at checkpoints or security posts. Before we head out, we also make sure to hand her the necklace we recovered from her old estate. Unfortunately, she is not overly appreciative after taking a moment to reminisce. She lashes out a bit, stating that she of course does not long for a time before she was Queen of the Forsaken, before she was undead. Alleria Windrunner, as she tells us, is long dead, and we can remove ourselves now from her presence. As we depart, however, she begins to enchant a particular song for the sorrow of the Sindori, with 3 banshees backing her up. Our own Sindori ambassador, Sunsorrow, beckons us over. He regrets that the necklace did not bring joy to Sylvanas, but hands us a book with the lyrics of the song Sylvanas has invoked. From here, it is on to Orgrimmar to secure our place within the Horde. We have proven ourselves, proven the capabilities of our people, and now we are going into an uncertain future, having reforged ourselves from the blood of the past. And that, my friends, is where we will end this video for today. I hope you have enjoyed our series looking at the Sindori and their lands as they were during the Burning Crusade era. Soon enough, we will be revisiting them to see how almost 18 years in universe has changed the lands of Quel'Thalas. If you have enjoyed this anthropological look at the Ghostlands at Quel'Thalas, or just like hitting buttons, please consider subscribing, liking the video, all the good stuff there, you know the drill. I have been your host Mal, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day today.